Sophia and Isabella had been best friends since university, the kind of friendship that survives distance, marriage, and years apart. So when Isabella begged her to move to Korea and start a new life, Sophia didn't hesitate. What she didn't know was that her best friend was carrying a secret. Years of devastating and a desperate hope Sophia would soon be asked to be part of. What started as an act of love slowly became a nightmare neither woman saw coming. A story about resentment, jealousy, a husband's shifting feelings, and a custody battle that would test loyalty, motherhood, and the true cost of friendship. Let's dive into it. 3 months earlier, Sophia had never imagined that a phone call from an old university friend would change the direction of her entire life. For years, Sophia and Isabella had been inseparable. They had studied together, survived difficult exams together, celebrated birthdays together, supported each other through heartbreak. Even after Isabella moved to South Korea following her marriage, their friendship remained strong. They spoke almost every week. Then, one evening, Isabella called with an unusual request. Sophia should come to Korea, not for a vacation, not for a few weeks. She wanted Sophia to come and stay with her and her husband. At first, Sophia laughed. The idea sounded impossible, but Isabella kept insisting. She promised Sophia a place to stay, promised to help her settle in, insisted that Korea would give her a chance to start over. Eventually, Sophia agreed. She had no idea that the invitation was connected to a secret Isabella had been carrying for years. A secret that would eventually place Sophia in the middle of a marriage she had never intended to touch. When Sophia finally arrived in Seoul, Isabella was waiting at the airport. The two friends embraced like they had never been separated. But Sophia noticed something almost immediately. Isabella looked happy to see her. Hajun did too. Yet there was something strange about the way the couple looked at each other. Something Sophia couldn't quite explain. At the time, she dismissed it. After all, she had only just arrived. There would be plenty of time to understand what was going on. Or so she thought. The apartment was beautiful. Isabella showed Sophia the guest bedroom, helped her unpack, spent the first few days taking her around Seoul. Everything seemed perfect. Until one night, Sophia woke to the sound of someone crying. She quietly stepped into the hallway. The sound was coming from Isabella's bedroom. Sophia stopped outside the door. She could hear Hajun's voice, then silence. The next morning, Isabella appeared at Sophia's bedroom door. Her eyes were swollen. She had clearly been crying. Sophia immediately knew something was wrong. But Isabella wasn't ready to tell her everything. Not yet. She only asked Sophia to keep what she had heard the night before a secret. And when Sophia agreed, Isabella finally revealed the one thing that had been breaking her heart. She had been trying to have a baby for years, and nothing had worked. Sophia had no idea that a few weeks later, Isabella would make a request that would test their friendship in a way neither woman could have imagined. In the weeks that followed, Sophia became more aware of how badly Isabella wanted a child. It was impossible not to notice. There were medical appointments, phone calls from fertility specialists, prescription bottles on the kitchen counter. Days when Isabella would return home unusually quiet and disappear into the bedroom. Sophia never pushed her. Whenever Isabella wanted to talk, she listened. Whenever she needed comfort, Sophia was there. One evening, the three of them sat together after dinner. Isabella went to the kitchen to get water. Hajun glanced at Sophia and offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for being here for her." Sophia smiled back. "Of course." Isabella returned a moment later. She caught the tail end of the smile between them. She said nothing, but something in her expression flickered, just for a second. Then it was gone. Sophia didn't notice. Neither did Hajun. One afternoon, Isabella came home looking completely defeated. Sophia found her sitting alone at the dining table. The untouched food in front of her had gone cold. "Isabella?" She slowly lifted her head. "The doctor says the treatment isn't working." Sophia sat beside her. "What treatment?" Isabella hesitated. "The IVF." Sophia's heart sank. They had hoped it would work. They had already tried several treatments, but Isabella's body was not responding the way the doctors had expected. The doctor wants to run more tests. Isabella wiped her face. And if those don't work? Sophia didn't know what to say. Isabella looked at her. There are other options. Something about the way she said it made Sophia uncomfortable. What kind of options? Isabella looked away. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she reached for Sophia's hand. Do you remember what you said that night? Sophia frowned. About helping someone have a baby? Isabella nodded. Sophia suddenly understood. You were talking about yourself. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She nodded again. Sophia sat completely still. Isabella began explaining. The doctors had discussed surrogacy, but even that wasn't as simple as they had hoped. There were complications with the embryos they had created. The chances of success were low. And after everything Isabella had already endured, another failed attempt could devastate her. Sophia listened quietly. Then Isabella said something that made her stomach tighten. There may be another way. Sophia slowly withdrew her hand. What way? Isabella looked toward the kitchen. Hajun was there, but he wasn't listening. At least Sophia hoped he wasn't. Isabella lowered her voice. A way for the baby to be biologically related to Hajun. Sophia stared at her. And suddenly, she understood exactly what Isabella was trying to say. No. The word came out before she could stop it. Isabella began crying. Please, Sophia. No. Sophia stood. This isn't what we talked about. I know. You said surrogacy. I know. You never said this. Isabella covered her face. Sophia walked toward the window. Outside, Seoul continued moving as though nothing had happened. Cars passed. People walked along the streets. Buildings glowed against the evening sky. But inside that apartment, everything had suddenly become complicated. Isabella eventually stood and walked toward her. No one else would understand. Sophia turned around. This isn't about understanding. It's about what you're asking. You're asking me to sleep with your husband. Isabella's tears fell faster. Only once. Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. You want me to carry your husband's child naturally. Isabella nodded. The doctors said it may be the only chance. Sophia looked toward the kitchen again. Hajun was still there. The man she had carefully treated with respect since arriving in Korea. Her best friend's husband. The man she had never once looked at inappropriately. And now Isabella was asking her to cross the one boundary that should never have been crossed. Sophia shook her head. I can't do this. Isabella reached for her. Please. No. Please don't make this decision now. Isabella's voice cracked. There is nothing else left. Sophia looked at her best friend. For the first time since arriving in Korea, Isabella didn't look like the confident woman Sophia remembered from university. She looked broken, desperate, afraid, and that made the decision even harder. That night, Sophia barely slept. She kept thinking about everything Isabella had told her. The miscarriage, the failed treatments, the years of disappointment, the dreams of becoming a mother. By morning, Sophia still hadn't changed her mind. But then she heard crying from the bathroom. Isabella. Sophia knocked gently. There was no answer. She knocked again. Isabella finally opened the door. Her face was wet with tears. Sophia stared at her. Isabella tried to turn away, but Sophia stopped her. Why are you crying like this? Isabella couldn't answer. Then she whispered the words that broke through every wall Sophia had built overnight. I just want to be a mother. Sophia closed her eyes. That sentence stayed with her the entire day. She tried to focus on work. She tried to think logically. She reminded herself that this wasn't her responsibility. But every time she remembered Isabella's face, the answer became harder to hold on to. That evening, Sophia asked Isabella and Hajun to sit down. There would be rules. There would have to be boundaries. Most importantly, this could never become anything beyond helping Isabella become a mother. Hajun remained quiet throughout the conversation. He looked uncomfortable. He looked ashamed. But when Sophia finally asked whether he understood what this meant, he nodded. He understood. Sophia looked at Isabella. The friendship had to survive this. Whatever happened, the friendship had to survive. Isabella promised it would. She promised that nothing would change. Sophia believed her. That was the mistake. Because none of them understood yet that a pregnancy could change more than Isabella's life. Could change the way Hajun looked at Sophia. Could change the way Sophia felt about the baby. And it could destroy a friendship that had survived for more than a decade. The decision was not made in one night. Sophia spent several days thinking about it. She researched everything she could. She spoke with doctors. She asked questions Isabella had never thought to ask. What would happen after the baby was born? Would Sophia have any rights? What would happen if she changed her mind? What if the pregnancy became complicated? What if her feelings changed? That last question frightened her most. Eventually, Isabella and Hajun sat down with her again. This time, the atmosphere was different. There was no pleading, no emotional pressure, just three adults trying to make an impossible decision. Isabella reached for Sophia's hand. The baby would be ours. Sophia looked at her. And what happens to me afterward? Isabella answered immediately. You go back to your life. Sophia nodded slowly. And our friendship? Isabella squeezed her hand. Nothing will change. Sophia looked at Hajun. He had barely spoken. Do you agree? He nodded. Yes. His voice was quiet. Sophia studied his face. There was no excitement in his expression. Only seriousness. He understood the weight of what they were asking. There was one final condition. Sophia would not be treated like a guest who could be discarded once the baby arrived. She would remain part of the child's life if she wanted to. Isabella agreed. Of course. The arrangement was supposed to be simple. At least that's what they told themselves. There would be no romance. No emotional attachment. No confusion. Once the baby was born, everything would return to normal. Sophia would move out and continue her life. Isabella and Hajun would raise their child. Everyone would remain friends. It sounded reasonable. Until reality arrived. The first time Sophia and Hajun were alone together, neither knew what to say. Sophia stood near the window. Hajun remained several feet away. Are you sure about this? Sophia asked. Hajun looked at her. Are you? She hesitated. No. Then why are you doing it? Sophia looked down. Because she is my best friend. Hajun nodded. That's why I'm doing it too. For Isabella. That answer made Sophia feel better. They both understood the boundary. And after that night, everything was supposed to remain simple. But it didn't. A few weeks later, Sophia began noticing small changes. She became exhausted. Foods she normally loved suddenly made her nauseous. Some mornings, she couldn't even get out of bed without feeling dizzy. Isabella was excited whenever Sophia mentioned a new symptom. That means it might have worked. Sophia smiled nervously. Maybe. They waited. Then one morning, Sophia realized her period was late. She stared at the calendar. 1 day, then 2, then 5. Her heart began pounding. She bought a pregnancy test and locked herself in the bathroom. Her hands trembled as she waited. One line appeared, then another. Sophia stared at the test. Positive. She sat on the closed toilet seat. For several seconds, she couldn't move. She was pregnant. She placed a hand over her stomach. There was nothing to feel yet. No movement. No bump. Nothing visible. But something had changed. Everything had changed. Sophia walked out of the bathroom. Isabella was sitting in the living room. The moment she saw Sophia's face, she stood. What happened? Sophia held out the test. Isabella looked at it. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Tears filled her eyes. You're pregnant. Sophia nodded. Isabella rushed toward her and wrapped her arms around her. They cried together. For the first time in years, Isabella looked completely happy. Thank you. She kept repeating it. Thank you. Sophia smiled through her tears. You're going to be a mother. Isabella placed her hands gently over Sophia's stomach. My baby. The words were innocent. At least they sounded innocent. Hajun arrived home later that evening. Isabella was waiting for him. She couldn't contain herself. We have news. Hajun looked between them. What happened? Isabella smiled through tears. It worked. Hajun froze. Sophia nodded. The pregnancy test was positive. For several seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he walked toward Sophia. Sophia. His voice sounded different. He looked overwhelmed. Then he pulled her into a brief hug. Thank you. Sophia laughed nervously. Hajun released her. His eyes remained on her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he looked away. Isabella didn't seem to notice. She was too happy. That night, the three of them celebrated quietly. Isabella cried. Hajun smiled more than Sophia had ever seen him smile. And Sophia sat quietly, one hand resting over her stomach. She didn't know it yet, but something had already changed. Not because of the pregnancy, because Hajun had started looking at her differently, and neither of them was prepared for what would happen next. The first few weeks of the pregnancy passed quietly. Isabella was happier than Sophia had seen her in years. She became obsessed with everything related to the pregnancy. She downloaded pregnancy apps. She read books. She researched baby names. She even started planning the nursery before Sophia had reached the end of her first trimester. Every morning, Isabella asked the same question. How are you feeling? Sophia would smile. Fine. But pregnancy wasn't always fine. The nausea became worse. Certain smells made her sick. She became exhausted after doing the simplest things. At first, Isabella was incredibly attentive. She prepared meals, made sure Sophia took her vitamins, accompanied her to appointments whenever she could, and Hajun quietly helped too. He never made a big deal out of it. If Sophia complained that she was hungry, food appeared. If she said she was cold, he adjusted the temperature. If she looked tired, he told her to rest. It was thoughtful. Nothing more. At least that's what Sophia told herself. One evening, Sophia came into the kitchen and found Hajun preparing dinner. She stopped. You cook? He glanced over. Sometimes. Sophia smiled. I didn't know that. There are many things you don't know about me. She laughed. Fair enough. He placed a bowl on the table. Sit. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since lunch. Sophia frowned. How do you know? You told Isabella. Sophia sat down. She took one bite. Then another. Hajun watched from across the kitchen. Better? She nodded. Much better. He smiled. Good. It was a small moment, but Isabella walked in and saw it. She stopped at the doorway. For a few seconds, she watched them. Then she forced a smile. What's happening? Hajun turned. She hasn't eaten. I was helping her. Isabella nodded. Right. Nothing seemed wrong. Not yet. The following weeks brought more changes. Sophia's stomach began to show. The pregnancy became impossible to ignore. At her next appointment, the doctor allowed them to hear the baby's heartbeat. Sophia lay still while the sound filled the room. Fast, strong, alive. Her eyes filled with tears. Isabella cried too. Hajun stood beside the bed. He looked completely stunned. That's our baby, Isabella whispered. Sophia smiled. But when the appointment ended, she remained unusually quiet. That heartbeat had affected her differently. For the first time, the baby didn't feel like an arrangement. Felt real. That night, Sophia sat alone in her bedroom with one hand resting over her stomach. She whispered softly to the baby, "You're going to be loved." She smiled. Very loved. She didn't hear Isabella standing outside the door. Isabella listened for a few seconds, then quietly walked away. The next morning, everything seemed normal, until Isabella asked a strange question. What were you saying to the baby last night? Sophia looked at her. Nothing. I heard you talking. Sophia smiled. I was just talking to the baby. Isabella's expression changed. The baby isn't yours. Sophia froze. She hadn't expected that. Of course not. I know. Isabella walked away. Sophia remained standing there. Something about that conversation stayed with her. Not because Isabella was wrong, but because the words had sounded less like a reminder and more like a warning. A few days later, Hajun returned from work carrying several shopping bags. Sophia looked at him. What's all that? He placed the bags on the table. Things for you. For me? You said your clothes were becoming uncomfortable. Sophia opened one of the bags. There were loose dresses, comfortable shoes, and several pregnancy-friendly outfits. She looked up. Hajun, you need comfortable clothes. This is too much. It's fine. Sophia smiled. Thank you. He nodded. Then he noticed her rubbing her lower back. Does it hurt? A little. He immediately became concerned. You should tell the doctor. It's probably normal. Maybe. But don't ignore it. Isabella walked into the room. Her eyes went straight to the bags. What did you buy? Hajun answered casually. Clothes for Sophia. Isabella stared at him. You bought her clothes? She needs them. Isabella looked at Sophia. You couldn't buy your own clothes? Sophia's smile disappeared. I didn't ask him to buy anything. Hajun stepped in. I offered. Isabella laughed bitterly. Of course you did. Hajun's expression hardened. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. She picked up one of the bags, then dropped it back onto the table. This is getting ridiculous. Sophia tried to calm things down. Isabella, please. But Isabella was already walking away. Hajun watched her leave. Then he looked at Sophia. I'm sorry. Sophia shook her head. It's not your fault. But from that day forward, things began to change. Isabella started watching them. Every conversation, every smile, every time Hajun asked Sophia how she was feeling. And slowly, the woman who had once begged Sophia to help her become a mother began to resent the very pregnancy she had desperately wanted. Sophia didn't understand why. She only knew that something had changed, and the worst was still ahead. Isabella's behavior didn't change overnight. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it happened little by little. A sharp comment here. Cold look there. A door closing harder than necessary. Sophia kept telling herself not to take it personally. Isabella was under pressure. She had spent years trying to become a mother. Now that the pregnancy was finally real, perhaps she was simply overwhelmed. So Sophia stayed patient. She tried to make herself smaller. She stopped sitting in the living room when Hajun was there. She stopped asking him for help. She even started preparing her own meals, even when she felt sick. But none of it seemed to matter. One morning, Sophia walked into the kitchen and found Isabella preparing breakfast. Good morning. Isabella barely looked at her. Morning. Sophia opened the refrigerator. She reached for the orange juice. Before she could pour herself a glass, Isabella spoke. You should probably stop drinking that. Sophia looked at her. Why? Too much sugar. The doctor didn't say that. I'm just saying. Sophia quietly put the bottle back. Okay. She reached for the bread. Then Isabella spoke again. Maybe don't eat that either. Sophia stopped. Why? You're gaining weight quickly. Sophia stared at her. I'm pregnant. I know. Then why are you talking to me like I'm doing something wrong? Isabella sighed. Don't start. Sophia said nothing. She simply left the kitchen. She told herself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Over the next few weeks, Isabella became increasingly critical. If Sophia slept too long, she was being lazy. If she ate too much, she was being careless. If she complained about nausea, Isabella told her that pregnancy wasn't an excuse to be difficult. And whenever Hajun defended Sophia, Isabella became colder. One evening, Sophia was sitting on the sofa when Hajun came home. He immediately noticed her face. Are you okay? Sophia nodded. Just tired. Did you eat? A little. He frowned. A little isn't enough. He went into the kitchen. Isabella watched him. A few minutes later, he returned with a bowl of food. Eat something. Sophia smiled. Thank you. Isabella's voice came from across the room. She can feed herself. Hajun turned. I know. Then why are you treating her like a child? Because she's pregnant. She's pregnant with our baby. The room became silent. Sophia lowered her eyes. Isabella stared at her husband. Our baby. She repeated it slowly. Then she looked at Sophia. Don't forget that. Sophia's face fell. Hajun noticed. Enough, Isabella. She stood. Why? Because I said something wrong? You know exactly what you're doing. Isabella laughed. No, I know exactly what she's doing. Sophia stood. I'm not doing anything. Isabella looked at her. Really? Then why does my husband care more about your comfort than mine? Sophia froze. Hajun immediately responded. That's not true, isn't it? You notice everything about her. What she eats. When she sleeps. When she's sick. You know when her back hurts. You know what foods make her nauseous. You remember her appointments. Isabella's voice cracked. When was the last time you noticed something about me? Hajun had no answer. Sophia felt uncomfortable. She stood. I'm going to my room. Isabella turned toward her. Of course you are. Sophia stopped. What does that mean? Nothing. But her tone said everything. Sophia walked away. She closed her bedroom door and leaned against it. Tears filled her eyes. She had never wanted any of this. She had come to Korea because Isabella was her best friend. She had agreed to carry the baby because she loved her. Yet somehow, she had become the person Isabella seemed to hate most. Days passed. The tension continued. Then Sophia became sick. She woke in the middle of the night with severe nausea and dizziness. She barely made it to the bathroom. Hajun heard the noise. Sophia? She couldn't answer. He knocked. Sophia opened the door. I'm fine. She wasn't. When she finally opened the door, Hajun saw how pale she looked. You need a doctor. It's just morning sickness. You're shaking. He helped her sit down. Isabella appeared in the hallway. What's happening? Sophia is sick. Isabella looked at her. Then sighed. She's pregnant, Hajun. I know. Pregnancy comes with sickness. Hajun looked at his wife. She can barely stand. And you want me to do what? Leave her alone? Isabella's face hardened. She doesn't need you hovering over her every time she feels uncomfortable. Hajun's expression changed. She's carrying your child. Isabella stared at him. And you're beginning to forget that. Silence. Sophia looked between them. Please stop. Neither of them listened. Hajun helped Sophia to her feet. I'm taking her to the hospital. Isabella's eyes widened. You're doing what? She needs medical attention. Sophia gently touched his arm. I can go myself. No. Hajun looked at her. You're not going alone. Isabella watched them leave. And for the first time, something inside her broke. She had wanted Sophia to carry her husband's child. She had never imagined that her husband would begin caring about Sophia as though she were more than the woman carrying his baby. After the hospital visit, Hajun brought Sophia home. He made sure she ate. He checked her temperature. He even stayed nearby until she fell asleep. Isabella watched everything from the hallway. She said nothing. But the next morning, Sophia found a note on her bedroom door. Pack your things. Sophia stared at it. She didn't understand. Then Isabella appeared behind her. What is this? Sophia turned. You tell me. Isabella crossed her arms. You need to start preparing to leave. Sophia's heart sank. Leave? After the baby is born, obviously. Sophia stared at her. The baby isn't even born yet. I know. Then why are you talking about me leaving? Because I don't want this arrangement to become permanent. Sophia swallowed. Neither do I. Good. Isabella walked away. But Sophia remained standing there. She placed a hand over her stomach. For the first time, she wondered if Isabella still saw her as a friend at all. Or if she had become nothing more than a woman carrying a baby Isabella believed belonged entirely to her. And that question would soon be answered. Sophia tried to forget the note. She couldn't. Pack your things. The words stayed in her mind all day. She had known from the beginning that she would eventually leave. That had always been part of the arrangement. But something about Isabella telling her to prepare to leave while she was still pregnant felt different. Felt like she was being dismissed. Like everything Sophia had sacrificed meant nothing. Still, Sophia didn't confront her. She decided to keep the peace. For the baby. For the friendship. And because somewhere inside, she still hoped Isabella would remember the woman she had been before jealousy took over. But Isabella only became worse. She began criticizing Sophia's clothes, then her eating habits, then the amount of time she spent resting. One afternoon, Sophia returned from a doctor's appointment carrying a small envelope. Isabella was sitting in the living room. How was the appointment? Everything is fine. Isabella nodded. Good. Sophia smiled. The doctor said the baby is growing perfectly. Isabella's face changed. She said nothing. Sophia sat down. The silence became uncomfortable. Then Isabella spoke. You seem very happy about this pregnancy. Sophia looked at her. Of course I am. Why wouldn't you be? Isabella looked away. Nothing. Sophia frowned. Isabella, what's happening? Nothing is happening. Then why have you been treating me like this? Isabella stood. Like what? Like you hate me. I don't hate you. Then what? Isabella laughed bitterly. You want the truth? Sophia stood too. Yes. Isabella stared at her. Every time I see you touching your stomach, I remember that you're carrying my husband's child. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. That's what you asked me to do. I know. Then why are you angry with me? Because things have changed. Sophia shook her head. I haven't changed. You have. How? Isabella stepped closer. You talk about the baby like it's yours. Sophia froze. It's growing inside me. That doesn't make it yours. Sophia instinctively placed a hand over her stomach. I know what we agreed to. Then act like it. The words hurt more than Isabella realized. Sophia's voice became quiet. You know what? You've been reminding me of that every single day. Good. Because I don't want you forgetting. Sophia stared at her. I haven't forgotten. Then stop behaving like the baby's mother. Something inside Sophia cracked. She took a breath. I am the one carrying this baby. I feel every movement. I feel every pain. I wake up sick. I can't sleep properly. I can't eat half the things I used to eat. And every time I talk to the baby, you make me feel guilty. Isabella folded her arms. Because the baby is mine. Sophia wiped a tear from her cheek. Then why did you ask me to carry it? Isabella didn't answer. Sophia walked toward her bedroom. Behind her, Isabella spoke. I can't wait until you give birth and leave. Sophia stopped. She slowly turned around. What? Isabella repeated it. I can't wait for you to give birth and leave. Sophia stared at her. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Sophia quietly nodded. Okay. Isabella looked surprised. Sophia walked into her bedroom. She closed the door. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not because she didn't know she would eventually leave, but because the woman she had crossed an ocean for had just made her feel like a burden. That evening, Hajun came home. He immediately noticed the tension. Where is Sophia? In her room. He looked at Isabella. What happened? Nothing. Hajun didn't believe her. He went to Sophia's room. He knocked. Sophia? No answer. He knocked again. Sophia, it's me. She opened the door. Her eyes were swollen. Hajun's expression changed. What's wrong? Nothing. You've been crying. Sophia looked away. It's not important. He stepped closer. Tell me. She shook her head. I don't want to cause another problem. Hajun frowned. What happened? Sophia hesitated. Then she told him. Everything. Hajun listened silently. When she finished, his face was hard. She told you to leave? Sophia nodded. Before the baby is even born? Yes. Hajun walked out. He found Isabella in the living room. Did you tell Sophia to leave? Isabella looked at him. Yes. Why? Because this was always temporary. She's carrying your child. I know. Then why are you treating her like this? Isabella stood. Because she's becoming too comfortable. Hajun's eyes narrowed. Comfortable? She sits around all day. She's pregnant. She expects everyone to take care of her. She's pregnant. You keep saying that because you keep forgetting it. Isabella's voice rose. You keep running to her every time she coughs. Every time she feels sick. Every time she needs something. Hajun stared at her. You were the one who asked her to come here. You were the one who asked her to carry our child. And now you're punishing her for doing exactly what you asked. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. Then explain it. She couldn't, because the truth was too humiliating to say aloud. She was jealous. Jealous of the way her husband looked at Sophia. Jealous of the way he worried about her. Jealous of the connection Sophia was developing with the baby. And most of all, she was terrified. Terrified that the woman she had invited into her home would leave with the one thing she had spent years desperately trying to have. The next morning, Hajun went shopping. He returned with several bags. Sophia was sitting quietly in the living room. He placed the bags beside her. What's this? Things you need. Sophia looked inside. Comfortable clothes. Pregnancy pillows. Shoes. Snacks. She looked up. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Sophia smiled faintly. Thank you. Isabella walked in. She stopped when she saw the bags. What is all that? Hajun answered. Things for Sophia. Again? Hajun turned. You've been buying things for her constantly. She's pregnant. She's not helpless. Sophia immediately stood. Please don't fight because of me. Isabella looked at her. You always say that. Because it is true. No. Isabella's voice became bitter. You like watching him defend you. Sophia stared at her. That's not fair. Isabella stepped closer. You came into this house as my friend. And now my husband can't stop worrying about you. Hajun stepped between them. Enough. Isabella looked at him. You're defending her again. Because you're being unfair. That was the final straw. Isabella picked up one of the bags and threw it across the room. Sophia flinched. Hajun's expression hardened. What are you doing? I don't want her here anymore. Sophia looked at Isabella. Her best friend. The woman she had crossed an ocean for. The woman whose baby she was carrying. And for the first time, Sophia understood. There was nothing left to save. She walked into her room. She pulled out her suitcase. Hajun followed. Sophia, what are you doing? Leaving. He shook his head. You can't leave like this. I can. You're pregnant. I know. Where will you go? Sophia wiped her tears. Anywhere I can breathe. Hajun stood silently. Sophia closed the suitcase. Then she placed one hand over her stomach. The baby moved. She smiled through her tears. And that was when Sophia made the decision she had been too afraid to make. She was done sacrificing herself for a friendship that no longer existed. She picked up her suitcase, walked past Hajun, and headed toward the front door. Isabella stood in the living room. Neither woman spoke. Sophia looked at her one last time. Then she walked out. The door closed behind her. And for the first time since arriving in Korea, Sophia was completely alone. But she didn't know that the man she had just left behind was about to make a decision that would change all three of their lives. Sophia had no idea where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay. She dragged her suitcase through the quiet street outside the apartment, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Every few steps, she wiped away another tear. She had imagined leaving Korea one day. She had imagined saying goodbye to Isabella with a hug. She had imagined returning to America after helping her best friend become a mother. She had never imagined leaving like this, pregnant, heartbroken, and completely alone. Sophia eventually found a small furnished apartment on the other side of Seoul. It wasn't luxurious. The bedroom was tiny. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person. But it was peaceful. And for the first time in months, Sophia could breathe. Back at the apartment, Hajun stood in the living room staring at the closed door. Isabella watched him. She's gone. Hajun slowly turned. Yes, you should be happy. He said nothing. Isabella's voice trembled. She'll give birth and everything will go back to normal. Hajun stared at her. Do you really believe that? Isabella frowned. What is that supposed to mean? You treated her terribly. She asked to leave. You pushed her away. Isabella folded her arms. Because she was getting too close to you. Hajun's expression changed. Finally, Isabella said what she had been hiding. You were jealous. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. I watched my husband care about another woman every day. She is carrying our child. And you began treating her like she was the most important person in the world. Hajun shook his head. I was concerned because she was pregnant. No, Isabella whispered. It was more than that. Hajun didn't answer. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew she was right. His feelings for Sophia had changed. He had tried to ignore them. He had told himself it was concern, responsibility, gratitude. But when Sophia walked out of that apartment, the thought of never seeing her again had terrified him. That night, Hajun slept on the sofa. The following morning, he went to work. But he couldn't concentrate. Every time his phone rang, he hoped it was Sophia. It never was. By evening, he made a decision. He needed to find her. Not to bring her back. Not to force her to forgive Isabella. He simply needed to know that she was safe. After searching for hours, he finally found her. Sophia was sitting alone in a small cafe near her apartment. She looked tired. Hajun stood several feet away. Sophia looked up. Her face immediately changed. What are you doing here? I wanted to make sure you're okay. I'm okay. Are you? She hesitated. I'm trying to be. Hajun nodded. He didn't sit down. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I won't ask you to come back. Sophia looked at him. Thank you. But I want to help. You don't have to. I know. I'm still going to. Sophia looked down. Hajun placed a small bag on the table. There are some things you left behind. She looked inside. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. He nodded. Then he left. He didn't ask for anything. And that made Sophia think about him even more. Over the following weeks, Hajun continued visiting. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he brought medicine. Sometimes he simply sat across from Sophia and talked about the baby. He never pressured her. He never mentioned Isabella unless Sophia brought her up. And slowly something changed between them. They began talking. Really talking. Sophia learned about Hajun's childhood. His family. His business. His fears. He learned about Sophia's dreams. Her career. Her childhood. The life she had left behind in America. They laughed together. They argued sometimes. And without realizing it, Sophia began looking forward to his visits. Then one afternoon, Sophia felt the baby move strongly for the first time. She placed her hand over her stomach. Hajun noticed. What happened? The baby moved. His eyes widened. Can I? Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Hajun gently placed his hand over her stomach. Another movement came. His face softened. Hello. Sophia laughed. You're talking to the baby already? Hajun smiled. Of course. For a moment they forgot everything else. But that moment frightened Sophia. Because she was beginning to understand that Hajun was no longer simply Isabella's husband. He was becoming someone she cared about. Someone she couldn't easily imagine losing. And that was exactly why she began creating distance. She stopped answering some of his calls. She asked him not to visit every day. She reminded him that the baby was the only reason they needed to remain connected. Hajun understood what she was doing. But he didn't give up. One evening he came to see her. Sophia opened the door. You shouldn't be here. I know. Why did you come? Because I need to tell you something. Sophia stepped aside. Hajun entered. He stood in front of her. I've tried to ignore it. Sophia's heart began beating faster. Ignore what? My feelings. She looked away. Hajun continued. I thought they would disappear. They didn't. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Please don't. I love you. She closed her eyes. Hajun, I know this is wrong. Then don't say it. I can't keep lying to you. Sophia shook her head. You are still married. Not for much longer. Sophia looked at him. What does that mean? Hajun took a breath. I ended my marriage with Isabella. Sophia's heart sank. You shouldn't have. That decision was mine. You shouldn't have done it because of me. I didn't. He stepped closer. I did it because the marriage was already broken. Sophia wiped a tear from her cheek. Even if that's true, I can't marry you. Hajun looked stunned. Why? Because you're my best friend's husband. She looked directly at him. Even if she isn't your wife anymore, I can't build a life with you. Hajun said nothing. Sophia's voice trembled. You are the baby's father. You have every right to be part of the baby's life. But I won't become your wife. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. I understand. Sophia turned away. But neither of them knew that Isabella had already begun preparing for a completely different battle. She wasn't coming after Hajun. She was coming after the baby. And this time she had a lawyer. Isabella had spent weeks telling herself that Sophia had taken everything from her. Her husband, her happiness, her chance at the family she had dreamed about for years. But when Hajun finally ended the marriage, Isabella was left with nothing but anger. And then she remembered the baby, the child Sophia was carrying, the child Isabella had always believed was hers. She hired a lawyer. The legal battle began before Sophia was even ready for it. One afternoon, Sophia received a letter. She read it twice, then a third time. Her hands began shaking. Hajun was beside her. What is it? Sophia handed him the letter. His expression hardened. Isabella is taking you to court. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. For the baby? He nodded. She wants custody. Sophia placed both hands over her stomach. She had expected Isabella to be angry. She had expected her former best friend to blame her for the divorce. But she had never imagined Isabella would try to take the baby away. A few days later, they stood in court. Isabella sat across from Sophia. For the first time in years, they were no longer sitting together as best friends. They were on opposite sides of a courtroom. Isabella's lawyer argued that the pregnancy had been created specifically for Isabella and Hajun. The intention had always been for the child to be raised by them. He submitted text messages from early in the pregnancy. Messages where Sophia had written that the baby would be theirs, that she was only carrying it for them. Sophia's stomach turned as the words appeared on the screen in front of the judge. Her own words, written before everything changed. For a moment, the courtroom felt like it was closing in on her. Her lawyer stood. Intentions expressed in a text message are not a legal transfer of parental rights. The judge studied the messages, then looked at Sophia. Is this your handwriting, so to speak? Your words? Sophia's voice shook. Yes. But there was no signed agreement transferring parental rights. No legal document giving Isabella custody. No contract stating that Sophia had surrendered the child. And most importantly, Sophia was the biological mother. The judge listened carefully. Sophia sat quietly. She wasn't there to punish Isabella. She wasn't there to take Hajun away. She simply wanted to protect her baby. When asked about the arrangement, Sophia told the truth. She had agreed to help Isabella become a mother. She had never agreed to surrender all rights to the child. She had never agreed to disappear from the baby's life. And she had never imagined that the woman she loved like a sister would eventually treat her as though she had no right to exist. Isabella began crying. But Sophia didn't look at her. The judge eventually made the decision. The court could not simply transfer the child to Isabella based on an informal understanding or early text messages written before the circumstances changed. Sophia was the biological mother. There was no enforceable written agreement giving Isabella parental rights. The child would remain with Sophia. Isabella lost. Outside the courtroom, Sophia stood quietly. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She simply placed a hand over her stomach. Hajun stood beside her. You won. Sophia shook her head. Nobody won. He looked at her. She looked toward the courtroom doors. We both lost something. That evening, Sophia returned home. She was exhausted. She sat on the sofa and stared at the floor. Then there was a knock. Sophia opened the door. Isabella was standing outside. Alone. No lawyer. No anger. No pride. Just tears. Sophia didn't say anything. Isabella looked at her. I don't deserve to be here. Sophia remained silent. But I needed to come anyway. Isabella's voice broke. I was wrong. Sophia looked away. I was so afraid. Afraid of losing Hajun. Afraid that, after everything I went through, I would never have a family. She wiped her tears. And I blamed you for all of it. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. You made me feel like I was nothing. You reminded me every day that the baby wasn't mine. You told me you couldn't wait for me to leave. Isabella began crying harder. Sophia looked at her. Why? Isabella swallowed. Because I was jealous. There it was. The truth Sophia had been waiting months to hear. I watched Hajun care about you. I watched you become attached to the baby. And instead of remembering that you were my best friend, I started seeing you as a threat. Sophia's tears finally fell. I never wanted your husband. I know that now. I never wanted to destroy your marriage. I know. And I never planned to keep the baby from you. Isabella nodded. I know. She looked toward Sophia's stomach. Can I ask you something? Sophia hesitated. What? Can I see the baby when she's born? Sophia didn't answer immediately. Isabella quickly added. Not as the mother. Not as someone trying to take your place. Just as Isabella. Your friend. Sophia looked at her for a long time. Then she nodded. Yes. Isabella broke down. Thank you. Sophia stepped forward. And for the first time in months, the two women hugged. It wasn't the same friendship they had before. Too much had happened. Too many words had been said. Too much damage had been done. But forgiveness didn't require pretending none of it happened. It simply meant choosing not to carry the hatred forever. Months later, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Hajun was there. He cried when he first held his daughter. Sophia watched quietly. There was love in his eyes. But there was no expectation. He had accepted the boundary Sophia had placed between them. He would be a father. Nothing more. And then Isabella arrived. She stood beside the hospital bed, tears running down her face. Sophia smiled weakly. You came. Of course. Isabella looked at the baby. She's beautiful. She reached out, then stopped. Can I? Sophia nodded. Isabella gently held the baby. She cried. I almost lost both of you. Sophia watched her. But you didn't. Isabella looked at her. Thank you for forgiving me. Sophia smiled. You're still my best friend. Isabella shook her head through her tears. After everything? After everything. Years later, people would still ask how Sophia and Isabella survived what happened between them. The answer was simple. Their friendship had been broken, but it had not been impossible to rebuild. Isabella eventually became the baby's godmother. Hajun remained a devoted father, and Sophia built a life that belonged entirely to her. She never became Hajun's wife. She never needed to, because sometimes the greatest love story isn't about ending up with the person you love. Sometimes it's about loving someone deeply enough to know that walking away is the right thing to do. And Sophia learned that the hard way. She had gone to Korea to help her best friend become a mother. She left that friendship nearly destroyed, but she returned to herself. And in the end, that was the one thing nobody could ever take away from her. The end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe and share to others. Also leave a comment to share your thought about the story.